This is part 3, episode 107. Nan Shui hugged her daughter and heaved a faint sigh. Let's protect him. Even though I don't know what's happened to him, if my guess isn't wrong, his female partner must have sacrificed herself for whatever it is that's happening to him. I have no idea why such peculiar things are happening to him, but they shouldn't be bad for him. But I feel so much pity for his female partner, and they're doing it all to save me. Hi. Nan Shui knew that the Earth Dragon sect was deep in Hui Yuhao's debt this time. Hui Yuhao had saved every one of the Earth Dragon sect's members, including her, the sect leader. His partner's life had been sacrificed in the process. How was she going to repay a favor as large as this? What? Ma Xiaodao stared at the third elder and the fourth elder. Her entire body had become lackadaisical. For her, what she had just heard from them was like bolts from the blue. Hui Yuhao had been ambushed and surrounded, and he finally burned his spiritual sea. He employed some special abilities to break out, and was now nowhere to be found. He burned his spiritual sea. Burned his spiritual sea. What did this mean? Ma Xiaodao came from Shrek Academy, so how could she not know what this meant? Yuhao. Yuhao. Ma Xiaotao's body quivered faintly, and frightening auras erupted from her body continuously. Are you all right, holy lady? Zhongli Tian asked softly. Evil lights flickered in Ma Xiaotao's eyes, and she glanced coldly at the third elder and fourth elder. She didn't mince her words, and paused after every word. Two-titled Doluor can't hold back a single soul king. The two of you are so capable. After him. Chase him down. If he's alive, I want to see him in front of me. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. She stretched out her phoenix wings as she spoke, and immediately transformed into a humongous fire phoenix, as she flew rapidly in the direction that the third elder had said that Hui Yuhao had disappeared towards. Inside Seajoy City. The city's port was bustling as usual, and goods and cargo were being transported here, and there were boats and ships entered and left the harbor. There was a relatively large transport ship, and the ship's crew was currently accounting for their ship's members. There were many people lying down around the ship's spacious cabin. Those who were in a relatively better state of mind could forcibly sit up with their legs crossed. However, everyone's eyes flowed with excitement, whether they were lying down or sitting up. They were excited because they were free. Shu Sansha, He Kaitu, Yi Gai, and Jing Ziyan were accounting for their ship's members. Their faces were grave and solemn at this moment, and Ji Juechen stood guard outside the ship's hold to prevent any unforeseen accidents. Their rescue operation could be said to have been exceptionally smooth and successful, or at least it seemed so. The operation had been carried out and completed entirely according to Hui Yuhao's plan. They had saved almost 600 people. In order to confuse their enemies, a little more than a dozen elders and seniors from those various sects and academies had remained to draw their enemies away. More than 95% of the hostages had been rescued, and everyone hurried to Seajoy City to rendezvous with the others. Everyone was a little exhausted and fatigued, because they had been flying at full speed, and because their bodies had been treated badly in the water prison. However, with sufficient food and water supporting them, it didn't take long for them to recover their full fighting strength. But even so, Shu Sansha and the others couldn't feel any joy at all, because Hui Yuhao and Nan Qiuqiu hadn't returned yet. This also meant that they couldn't rush to Seajoy City to meet up with the rest in time. Hui Yuhao had already accounted for a situation like this. As long as the hostages were all here, they would immediately cast off and depart, while he and Nan Qiuqiu would find another way to return to the academy. Everything had been prearranged, but He Kaitu's news still gave everyone a heavy heart. A single beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legion entering the fray had changed the situation, and nobody knew what was happening with Hui Yuhao and Nan Qiuqiu, because they couldn't communicate with them at all. Naturally, they hoped that they could wait for them to return before they departed, and only then would everyone be in high spirits. Only then could their operation be considered perfect, and without any blemishes at all. Are you guys from Shrek Academy? Thank you. An elderly man, who was about 60 years of age, stood up and came up to Shu Sansha, who was still accounting for everyone, and spoke to him in a voice full of gratitude. Shusansha suppressed the anxiety and unsettledness in his heart and replied with a faint smile, "You're welcome, but you don't have to be so polite. The Sun Moon Empire is very scheming and treacherous, and they disregarded the tournament's rules that have been passed down across millennia within the continent by forcefully imprisoning so many people. How can Shrek Academy and the Tang sect sit by and watch?" Cold light flickered in the elderly man's eyes. The Sun Moon Empire, the Sun Moon Empire. Do they really think they can dominate the entire continent by relying on their soul tools? That's just wishful thinking. How can the Sun Moon Empire compare to the Doluo continent's foundations and history? Shusansha nodded and said, "We have to come together as one. Even if the Sun Moon Empire launches an invasion against us, we may not lose to them. You should get some rest, senior. We will be casting off shortly." "All right, thanks. The Lone Heaven sect will always remember what you guys have done for us. Shrek Academy just has to call for us in the future, and we will never shy away from whatever you guys need from us." The Tang sect's reputation was still too small, and paled in comparison to Shrek Academy, which had been established for 10,000 years. Therefore, even though Shusansha mentioned several times that the rescuers didn't just come from Shrek Academy, and that they also came from the Tang sect, most of the hostages pinned this favor on Shrek Academy. He Kaitu walked over from the other side and checked his head count with Shusansha. There were about 12 people who hadn't arrived yet, but it was obvious that these people would probably never arrive. "It's about time, Sansha." Hikaitu uttered these words with much difficulty. Hikaitu was before Shusansha in seniority, but Shusanshi's status within the Tang sect was a little higher than his. Shusansha grit his teeth as he glanced at the hostages in the ship's hold, lowered his voice and announced, "Start the ship." Several minutes later, an enormous iron anchor was gradually pulled up. The sailors and hands that the Tang sect had hired worked together, and the colossal transport ship slowly departed the harbor and sailed towards the endless ocean. In the Sun Moon Empire's royal palace. "What? The hostages are gone." Shu Qianran's typically calm voice was suddenly excessively penetrating, causing the entire hall's ceiling to tremble. Shu Qianran was wearing a long, bright yellow robe, and his face was grave and gloomy at this moment. He stared coldly at several people who were kneeling down before him, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. The Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion's commander was kneeling before him, along with the commanders of the 2 Soul Engineer Legions, who had been stationed around Sunrise City. "Speak. What happened? Tell me everything in detail," Shu Qianran said plainly, not taking long before he regained his composure. However, everyone could feel that this was just the calm before the storm, and if anything wasn't explained properly, or if errors were made throughout the process, someone's head would probably be immediately sent rolling across the ground. Juzi was sitting beside Shu Qianran, her expression a little black as well. The Holy Ghost Church and 2 Soul Engineer Legions were watching over those hostages, along with the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion, which was the legion most adept at speed among the Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legions, to assist them, and yet several hundred hostages had still managed to run away. This was extremely humiliating. Furthermore, those hostages were extremely valuable to the Empire, because they restrained the Doluo continent's 3 native empires. At the same time, these hostages remaining in the Sun Moon Empire was also equivalent to greatly restricting the 3 empires' future top-tier Soul Masters' strength. Now that they were always gone, the Sun Moon Empire's plan and strategy had to be changed, and their borders were in danger of being assaulted by these 3 empires in revenge at any moment. These commanders immediately began their reports, everyone responsible for one part. Their reports, when added together, explained the entire process of how their hostages managed to escape in detail. "Someone please invite the Imperial Tutor to discuss matters." Shu Qianran passed on an order after listening to the 3 commanders, and a servant immediately ran frantically to fulfill his command. Shu Qianran's eyes closed into slits, and his eyes flowed with a contemplative look. The Holy Ghost Church was in charge of the most crucial parts of watching over the hostages, and they even used drugs that can dispel a Soul Master's soul power. But every single hostage ran away. What were those guys doing? 2 evil-titled Doluo couldn't even guard that place properly. They couldn't even buy enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Furthermore, they had managed to surround one of the rescuers at the end, but even this person got away. Two titled Doluor couldn't hold back a single soul king. Who would believe that? Have you investigated who that person is? I'm talking about that person who burned his own spiritual power to escape. Xu Tianran asked coldly. The Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion's commander, Wang Yiheng, said respectfully, we've already investigated as much as possible. That person should have come from Shrek Academy, or the Tang sect. Not long ago, he represented the Tang sect and participated in the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. Zhu Zi was expressionless at the start, but her expression changed drastically when she heard these words, as an ominous feeling rose in her heart. That person participated in the tournament, so some of my subordinate soul engineers recognized him. His name was Hui Yuhao, but he was in a wheelchair when he fought in the tournament. His movements were normal when he appeared last night, but we are sure that these two are the same person. The city wall was broken through by someone who controls ice-type abilities, and according to our investigation, Hui Yuhao possesses ultimate ice. Zhu Zi almost fainted when she heard these words, and nearly slid down from her chair. Hearing about Hui Yuhao's appearance was supposed to be good news for her, because she hadn't heard anything about him ever since he and the others had disappeared into the Yin-Yang love-querying valley. In the months afterwards, Zhu Zi had even discreetly sent someone over to search for them, but her efforts had been futile. However, even though Hui Yuhao had appeared once more, he was in an excessively dire situation. Yuhao, it's Yuhao. Why was he here to save those hostages? And he even burned his own spiritual power. How is he? Zhu Zi couldn't maintain her composure anymore, and she felt as if she was sitting on pins and needles at this moment. Xu Tianran was over the top with anger and rage, but he was momentarily stunned when he heard Wang Yiheng's words. He pondered for a moment, then said, I have an impression of him. Yes, he was sitting in a wheelchair when he participated in the tournament. He was the one that led the Tang sect to create miracles again and again, and they even managed to defeat the Holy Ghost sect's team in the end. He disappeared without a trace, along with everyone else from Shrek Academy, afterwards. Xu Tianran's eyes closed into slits as cold light flickered in them. He actually came back to rescue those hostages. That means he didn't die in the Western Mountains valleys. They actually came out of that strange place alive. Commander Wang, you can get up. You were only responsible for the reinforcements. The situation was already fixed when you arrived. This matter has nothing to do with you. Yes, Your Majesty. Wang Yiheng got to his feet and stood off to one side. Xu Tianran was seething with rage at this moment, and he really wanted to kill the three commanders before him to vent his anger. However, his rationality allowed him to control this impulse. No matter what, these three commanders were top-tier soul engineers, especially Wang Yiheng, who was a Class 9 soul engineer. The Sun Moon Empire had an overwhelming number of soul engineers, but even so, Class 9 soul engineers were considered strategic existences. Wang Yiheng commanded the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion, and he was one of the fingers of the hand that protects the nation. He was a titled Doluor, of course, and his title was the Mad Bull. The Mad Bull Doluor, Wang Yiheng, had quite a reputation in the world of soul engineers. The other two commanders were both Class 8 soul engineers, and Xu Tianran couldn't bear to kill them, no matter what had happened. However, he had to let them kneel for a little while longer. It didn't take long for the Holy Ghost Church's leader, who was also the Sun Moon Empire's imperial tutor, to arrive. He was clad in black, and Ma Xiaodao had once told Hui Yuhao that his name was Zhong Wu. He was the descendant of the previous leader of the Holy Ghost Church, the same person who had disturbed and troubled the twin holy dragons of black and white, the evil soul master, Yi Shishui. Zhong Wu didn't come alone, the third and fourth elders accompanied him. Ma Xiaodao had quickly vanished without a trace after she ran out hysterically yesterday, and hadn't returned since then. The elders were helpless about that, and had no choice but to return to Radiant City. They reported this to Zhong Wu as soon as was possible. Zhong Wu knew that Xu Tianran would definitely seek him out. Therefore, he decided to bring his two elders along while the three Zhong brothers were here. The Holy Ghost Church's leader, Zhongwu, tilted his head slightly in greeting when he saw Xu Qianran. Xu Qianran's expression warmed a little as he said, "Sit down, Imperial Tutor." Zhongwu sat down on the seat beneath Xu Qianran, and didn't wait for Xu Qianran to ask as he took the initiative. "Your Majesty, I already know about everything. This matter is too sudden, and there is something odd about it. I will allow my subordinates to explain things to you first." Zhongwu waved at several of his subordinates as he spoke. The third elder and the fourth elder were the main narrators, as they began to explain the story at once. The three Zhong brothers added in from one side, and everyone detailed the entire process according to what they knew. Xu Qianran squinted after listening to their accounts, and said, "That means someone dispelled the poison given to those hostages. However, Imperial Tutor, I remember you mentioning to me that only you possess the antidote for the soul-eradicating powder's intense poison. Someone actually managed to create an antidote independently. Furthermore, Sunrise City's defenses were tight and strict. So how did these people sneak into the city and discover where the water prison was located? They had a meticulously detailed plan, and they even attacked Sunrise City by firing large amounts of soul tools into the city. In the end, they even destroyed the soul tools that they didn't bring away. The entire process was specifically delegated, and they carried out their rescue operation impeccably. Without discussing these people's fighting strength, how scheming they are is astonishing. Furthermore, what makes me furious is the fact that they managed to install so many soul tools within Sunrise City, including Class 8 stationary soul cannon shells, without our patrols discovering anything at all. Since that's the case, does that mean that if someone installs stationary soul cannon shells inside Radiant City, will I also possibly be blown into smithereens at any moment? At this point, Xu Qianran's hostility, and all the murderous air that he had suppressed before this, permeated the room once more. The two commanders kneeling beneath him could feel sweat breaking out on their foreheads. "Calm down, Your Majesty," Zhongwu lowered his voice, continuing, "This matter has far exceeded our expectations. We are spying on and monitoring most of the powerful individuals who belong to the Doluo continent's 3 native countries. They managed to sneak into our empire and execute a rescue operation such as this, and eventually brought every single hostage away. This operation can't have been completed by 1 or 2 people, so I'm certain that they must be backed by immense wealth, labor, and material resources. Where does their manpower come from? After we received the news, we sent out another 2 beast-rank soul engineer legions in pursuit. According to our leads, they should be heading towards the ocean. Once they pass proper intel back to us, I will let Xiao Feng lead some of my sect's sharpest and most elite members to cooperate with your soul engineer legions to pursue those perpetrators. We must catch them before they leave your country's borders." Xu Qianran nodded and said, "We can only mend the fold after the sheep have been stolen. Hopefully, we can intercept them in time." Report. "Your Majesty, urgent news from the border." A guard knelt down outside the hall and reported respectfully. "Send it in." Xu Qianran was in a terrible mood, and everything he was afraid of happening was happening. Had something happened at the border again? A sealed letter was quickly passed into his hands. After a few moments, Xu Qianran's face turned black as he slammed his palm into a table beside him, smashing it to pieces. "The border has reported that all of the powerful individuals from Shrek Academy have disappeared without a trace, and the other powerful individuals above the Soul Doluo rank from the Star Luo Empire, the Heavenly Soul Empire, the Doling Empire that we have been monitoring vanished along with them. There is no question that these people must be going to reinforce those hostages." The Holy Ghost Church's leader was quiet as he listened to Xu Qianran's words. This plan was too perfect. Its perpetrators didn't give them any chances at all. The hostages were rescued before the news of those powerful individuals disappearing came. Xu Qianran muttered angrily, "Who are these people who rescued the hostages? Are they inconspicuous and unassuming individuals within the world of Soul Masters? Imperial Tutor, it looks like the Holy Ghost Church really has to be reorganized and tidied up." Xu Qianran's tone wasn't too overboard, but even the Holy Ghost Church's leader, who he had always respected, was berated amidst his seething rage. Zhongwu was equally indignant. He got to his feet and lowered his voice as he said, "I will give you an explanation, Your Majesty." He turned to the third elder, the fourth elder, and the three Zhong brothers as he spoke. "The big toe of your right foot." Zhongwu's voice was very calm, but it was also cold and eerie at the same time. Blood erupted into the air as all 5 members of the Holy Ghost Church tore off the big toes of their right feet one after another, and tossed them to the ground. Fresh blood immediately splashed all over the ground. 2 of them were title Doluor, and 3 of them were Sol Doluor. Zhongwu uttered but one sentence, and they had no choice but to harm themselves like that. Zhongwu walked forward and came before the 2 Soul Engineers, who were kneeling on the ground. "Your defenses have failed, and you were played by the enemy however they wished. You concentrated a lot of resources on the city, but the enemy managed to sneak in anyway. The 2 of you are responsible." The 2 Soul Engineers raised their heads subconsciously as they heard his grave and chilly voice. Their eyes were filled with fear as they subconsciously glanced at Shu Qianran. One of them blurted out, "Your Majesty." Zhongwu made his move before Shu Qianran could say anything. A pair of skeletal claws that were as black as ink sprang from nowhere and clawed into these 2 Class 8 Soul Engineers' heads. Powerful auras emerged from Zhongwu's body, and he suppressed the 2 Soul Engineers forcefully, so that they couldn't resist him at all. These 2 Soul Engineers were 8-ringed Soul Doluor, but their soul tools had been seized before they came to see Shu Qianran. Furthermore, they were Soul Engineers, and they paled in comparison to Soul Masters of the same rank when they didn't have their soul tools. There was nothing else to say when they were confronted by a mighty evil Soul Master like Zhongwu. The 2 Soul Engineers didn't even make a sound as they collapsed to the ground, lifeless. 2 panicky and frightened spirits were forcefully extracted from their bodies, and were compressed by black air streams coming from Zhongwu's hands. They became 2 spheres flickering with faint white light, and eventually disappeared into thin air. Zhongwu turned around and said to Shu Qianran, "Your Majesty, the matter has already reached this stage, so we can only think of a solution as quickly as possible. We shall wait for my subordinates, who are chasing those perpetrators, to return, and will pass any news to you as soon as possible. You have to make plans at once as well, war might be inevitable at this point. Farewell." With that, he turned to leave, and the other 5 evil soul masters resisted the intense pain with great difficulty as they followed Zhongwu away. Shu Qianran's face was black, and his breathing was evidently a lot coarser and heavier than usual. His fists were clenched tightly as he stared at the 2 corpses on the ground. The Mad Bull Doluor, Wang Yiheng, couldn't hold himself back anymore and shouted angrily, "Too wanton. Your Majesty, he's too outrageous and unbridled." Those 2 Class 8 Soul Engineers weren't his subordinates, but they came from the same system, after all. The Holy Ghost Church's leader had killed them right in front of Shu Qianran, and he couldn't help but feel distressed for others of his kind. Shu Qianran grunted coldly and said, "Go and rest, Commander Wang." "Your Majesty." "Leave?" Shu Qianran's eyes widened as he yelled at Wang Yiheng, and intense hostility instantly permeated the entire hall. "Yes." Wang Yiheng forcefully suppressed the anger and fear in his heart as he bowed respectfully, before turning and leaving. Several servants immediately streamed in and carried the 2 corpses away. Shu Qianran said plainly, "They have died in the line of duty, and will receive a generous burial. Compensate their families generously." Juzi's emotions had calmed down at this point, and she hid her intense grief and anxiety deep within her heart. She had always been rational, and she was very clear that if Hu Yuhao didn't have other methods, or if luck wasn't on his side after he burned his own spiritual power, he was probably dead. She had always had a kind of blind confidence in Hu Yuhao, and she kept telling herself, "This fellow is so good at creating miracles. He can't possibly die so easily. He must be alive, he must be." Juzi got to her feet, walked behind Shu Qianran, and gently massaged his shoulders, which had become a little tense due to his rage. Shu Qianran's black face warmed a little when he felt the strength and warmth from Juzi's tender, small hands. He gently patted her soft hands and said, "Only you don't talk too much, you never speak more than you have to." Juzi continued to massage him as she whispered, "Take care of your body, Your Majesty. Don't let anger damage your body." Yes, she was never one to speak too much in front of Xu Tianran, because she understood how intelligent he was. He knew everything, and he would understand everything without needing her to say anything at all. Xu Tianran laughed coldly and said, "The imperial tutor is trying to give me a show of strength." Good, very good. One day. HMPH. Juzi still said nothing, and just continued massaging him gently. This video will end here.